What up? What up? It is Wednesday. Wednesday, 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 Wednesday. That's my echo effect. We're going to be talking about a little bit of an echo effect today. But first, of course, just making sure people start understanding that the class is started. 10:02, trying to collect all the people out there. Got the Instagram live running for a little bit, see if I can throw out some notifications, let people know we are going live with audio production. Good stuff. All right. Before we get started, of course, the daily routine here, the No Excuse Corner, which now becomes the No Excuse webpage. Ooh, bringing some normalcy back to the classroom. That's right, folks. Welcome to the No Excuse page. So this is our Google Classroom, as you see, as you know, as you are much familiar with. The stream itself will give you information about what's going on within the classroom. Of course, we're still using the same Zoom code. And of course, today we are going to be discussing Space Designer and Delay Designer in one day. That's right. When I have the full attention with no distractions, no phone ringing, no attendance lady coming through, no math, no science, I can actually bust through a lot of different things. And then, of course, everything that we do in the classroom can be reviewed later over here on our YouTube page. I record every single day's lesson. So if in fact you missed a day or you half got it or you came in late or you left early or whatever it is, you can always go check out our YouTube page. It is the entire lesson all the way through again and again and again. I'm not looking for followers. I'm not looking for views. I'm not looking for you to smash that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I don't care much about that. I just want you guys to have the resources you will need in order to take the test on Friday. Again, the notes should be up later today, so you have them about 48 hours ahead of the test, roughly around 40 hours. Let's say 36. And again, what I would do is I would take those notes and then, of course, go back through the lessons and watch them and listen to them. Make sure you're copying those notes into your notebook. I shouldn't have to say that, but of course, many of you will pretend like you never heard it. And then when I say, oh, there's a notebook check, you're going to go, what? There's a notebook check? And by the way, you don't actually need to have your notebook at home. You can have a piece of paper. Write the date and go ahead and copy the notes that are posted up on the Google Classroom. It really isn't that difficult, and it really won't take you all that much time to do. So I recommend, since 20% of your grade is based on the notebook, and literally the only thing you probably will have at notebook check time is notes. There's not going to be any handouts. I'm not going to expect you to print anything. I'm not going to expect you to have any graded projects back or test back or anything like that. That's not notebook this time. This time around, it's probably going to solely rely on you copying those notes from the stream on the Google Classroom. 20%. What else is up there? Well, of course, you took the test last Friday. If you haven't taken that test, you still need to take it. It is a 0 right now, and that's not good for 30% of your grade. And we have a project coming up that's due on Friday. Now, I have gotten a couple of emails, actually, over the last couple of weeks about the amount of work that you're doing for your homeschool versus the amount of work you're doing for me. And I'm sorry that your homeschool, in the whatever number of classes you possibly could have left at this point, you're with me for half the day. So how many periods could you have? 4, maybe 5? And I don't know how much of that they're giving you and how much work they're handing you. But last time I checked, we ain't going anywhere. You have 24 hours in a day to get work done. So unless you are a essential worker, and please let me know in an email to me whether you're an essential worker with the information so I can forward that on to our administration. But if you, for some reason, are an essential worker and you have way too much work, I need to know that. Otherwise, I'm leaving them zeros in there. But I need to have good details, not just write me an email saying, hey, I'm an essential worker. Not good enough. Need to have details. When do you go to work? How many hours a week? Where you're working? Just so I can forward it on to administration. So when they ask, why didn't this student do any work? They've been attending the class. They've been a member on the Google Classroom. Why didn't they do anything? I typically would say, well, that's a question for them. But now at least I'll have a first, response is, well, I know that they were an essential worker and they were doing 40 hours a week and, it was tough to get a lot of the work done. Not to say that we're going to let it go, but maybe we give you an extension. But either way, I need to have those full details in order for us to give you some sort of path in which to make up the work. Otherwise, you're all responsible for everything I put up here on the due date. If not, you will lose points. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it's going to work because, like I said, for the most part, I'm going to say 99% of you are just sitting home for 24 hours a day. So figure out a time to get the work done. I don't think I'm giving you a lot of work, 15 minutes a day with maybe another 15 minutes of writing. And that's about it. Plus the time it takes to do our class. I'm actually probably giving you less work than you would if we were in school. I'm not giving you more. If someone else is giving you more, that's a discussion you need to have with them, not me. All right. Moving on. Yes, we have some new grades that came in, which is great. Please always check your email to make sure that if you handed something in and I handed it back to you because something wasn't 100% right, you definitely need to redo it and follow the instructions on the post. So I graded a couple this morning with some details in there. But again, you could see we still have a lot of missing grades and a lot of people that may probably not pass this class in the fourth quarter. So my hope is you have good grades for the first three and you know how to take a final exam, which we will have a final exam no matter what the situation is. We will have a final exam regardless. Whether we're back in school or not, there will be a final exam, which counts as a fifth quarter. So again, if you are keeping up with the class and have all the information, this is not a problem. You will be golden. We will do a review. We'll do all that other good stuff. But for those of you who have not been keeping up and have a really poor grade for the fourth quarter so far and have not done any work, and those of you who have, borderline grades or sub-borderline grades in the first three quarters, this isn't going to work out for you. And I hope you take the time in the next few weeks to make up all the work, get everything done, so you have that burden lifted off your shoulder. So hopefully when we go back, you're right in line with what we're supposed to be doing. Pay attention, finish out the year on a positive uptick or positive attitude or positive whatever. Don't let this bring you down, please. This is a time where, especially for what we're doing now, it can really be a benefit to your grade. People are going to do, some people that really don't do as well on tests or in projects in school might actually do really well this quarter. I've been noticing some grades coming in and people doing the work that aren't typically the best students in the class. So highly recommend that you take advantage of the time you have, both, of course, with your family and with your health, but of course, with this class and other classes like it, where things aren't as difficult probably because of what we're capable of doing, what our limitations are, we'll say. All right, I'm going to cut off the Instagram account now that we've collected as many people today as we're probably going to do. So we'll say goodbye to Instagram. Later, guys. Always have Chef Nancy Combert check in and some, I love it when the alumni check in and say, what's up? What up? All right. Yeah, so just check the stream and move forward. And yeah, we're not going to do this part. This is from last Friday for April 10th. It's a quiz day. Yay. All right, we'll delete this. Bye-bye. So the great thing about the stream is I can delete old notifications and I can update new things. And I love this interface. I've always loved this interface. It's just our school wasn't always so keen on it. But now I think things will change for the better. And I love the fact that I can send a spreadsheet of these grades and people's names to guidance and to the homeschools and to administration. And I just ask that, be careful because as you can see, there are some grades coming in, which is great. Some of the grades aren't great. So I usually send it back and say, do this, do that. I will regrade these. I have no problem regrading these. If you didn't like the grade you got, not on a quiz, obviously, but on a project, yeah, I definitely am going to want to see a better effort from you. So I will send it back to you and allow you to redo it so it becomes the best possible grade you can get. All right. Any questions in the participant chat room that need to be addressed before we move forward in logic? I'll give you 30 seconds to devise a question that you may have about the work. Go. No questions. 0. All right. Well, let's do some logic work then, huh? Shall we? Shall we? Again, remember, YouTube page. Go back and watch the lessons. Anyway, let me minimize this bad boy and let's open up some logic. All right, here's what we've been working in. If you missed a day or so, you might see new stuff in here, and that's correct because every day we kind of add and subtract from our project, our little test project that we've been working on, and our ability to add certain elements step by step, piece by piece. So, just quick review. Monday, we talked about the channel EQ. On every single audio track that I have, I add an EQ in the first slot of the audio effects because it allows me some small adjustments to be made to take that really good recording and make it great. After the channel EQ, we're going to go ahead and add in the compressor. Now, the compressor, we spent a long time yesterday talking about how that compressor is going to affect the signal by reducing the dynamic range and allowing a more consistent signal, depending on the recording, obviously. And then once I have a consistent signal, now I can really set it to be either predominantly in the mix, set it behind other instruments in the mix, or set it really low. Now, once we have these elements in place and we've made our adjustments, now I'm not going to put them on there and not touch them yet. I'm going to touch them pretty much right away. As soon as I add my EQ, I'm going to go in, I'm going to set up my loop, I'm going to play it around a few times. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. And I'm going to do that a bunch just to get an idea in my brain of kind of how that sounds with and without EQ changes. Then I'm going to take it, add the compressor, and do the same thing. So now I'm going to go back through it, listen to it in solo mode, seeing how the settings that I put into the compressor make a difference in the signal. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. And as you can see, obviously my signal coming in, the original recorded signal is around a -9, which isn't great if you want this particular signal to be a predominant part of the mix. So what we do is we add compression to reduce the dynamic range and then allow ourselves to boost that entire signal up so it sits in the mix. And so then you could see the result ended up reaching closer to 0, which is where I would want it. Punch in, and this is a test. And really, I'm bouncing exactly where I should be bouncing, between -6 and 0. That's exactly where I want to be, especially for a predominant sound that should be in my mix, something that should be at the forefront of my signal. So now that I've kind of soloed it, EQ'd and compressed it, now I'm going to release it back into the mix and hear how it works with the other instruments. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. And I think that what I did to my MIDI tracks back here, it exactly represented what I was looking for in the mix. I can always go over to my mixer and just take a look at how that all, worked its way out. My Sunset kit was left at 0. My Steinway piano, I dropped down a little bit. I could probably put it a little more back now that I have the compressor in. My violins are at full volume right now, and I don't mind that, but we can always change that later. And I have an effects bank of these weird little ultra beat sounds over here, just to remind you what that is. It sounds like this. And as you can hear, or maybe you can't, but if you did, you would hear that the ultra beat actually is feeding, a lot of it is feeding into the bus. And the bus and the space designer and all that is what we're going to be talking about today. But we're going to create a brand new one for our vocal track, just so we have a separated area for our vocal track to have some sort of effects on it. So let's put my loop back over my vocals. One other thing, I do want to mention is I actually messed around with automation yesterday right after the lesson, and I want you to hear this Sunset kit and tell me what you think about this. Maybe you didn't hear it, but I put a automated echo on there, so it kind of rings out at the end with that crescendo we worked on last week. Here it is again. You You can hear it really rings out in the space. I like that. I'm not quite sure if you guys are hearing audio directly from my computer or not. So that's why I whipped the mic around to the speaker. And I don't even know if that's going to produce a loop or not, but it's fine. Either way, you can get the idea. And we'll show you how to automate that send or that effect probably tomorrow. We'll talk about adding the effects today, both Space Designer and Delay Designer, and then we'll talk about automating them. But I was messing around with it yesterday, and that's kind of what I was looking for in that crescendo, that drum roll, and then it just hit out on that last beat and echo out a little bit. It's a common, I'm going to say a relatively common effect engineers use to create some sort of blend and echo out, and really, it's an impactful moment. If you're talking about the emotion of a song, you know, that is something that is used in a couple of different songs. I can go out and find a song like that so you guys know what I'm talking about. And if you know any songs that end like that, let me know and I'll play them as examples. But that's just something that I wanted to do. So anyway, going back to my vocal track. So we're going to add our Space Designer, and we are going to add our Delay Designer. We're going to do it separately, and we're going to talk about each one separately. In order to do some of this routing, what I'm probably going to end up doing is working in the mixer. I find it the best place to work with routing because there's just so much room, and I can really visually see when a track is created and where that is placed and how it all works. So that's it. On my vocal track, in the mixer, again, you could see that I have my EQ, I have my compressor, I'm happy with all that. So my next step now is to create a route so my Space Designer can be fed by a bus using a send. Now, these are all words and terms we've already discussed. We discussed them early on, we discussed them in Pro Tools, so we're doing the same thing in Logic. The difference here in Logic is that a lot of times it does things for you. You may know this, like in Pro Tools, we had to manually create an auxiliary track and then connect them. In Logic, all I have to do is just create that bus. So we'll go over here to my mixer, we'll go into my sends, we'll go over to my audio track, and I'm going to go ahead and pick an unused send at this point. Hold on, let me just admit, I think that's Trey coming in. I'm going to go ahead and create a send using an unused bus. So at this point, you could see these three buses are already being used by my MIDI. When I selected the patch in MIDI in the library, these were automatically created. It's one of the benefits of having the library patches. They actually do things for you. What I'm doing here manually is I'm going to be adding a bus to my send on my audio track, and here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to click on send. I'm going to go to bus. I'm going to pick bus 4 because right now you can tell it's unused. There's nothing next to it. So I'll select bus 4. Over here in the mixer, you could see that bus 4 was created. It actually called it auxiliary 4. And I'm actually going to call it Vox Reverb because we're going to be using Space Designer to create a reverb plugin. Now, in Pro Tools, when we created this link, you remember a little fader came up on the side, right? Its own floating fader window. Logic doesn't use floating fader windows. Logic uses these little pots or dials, and you can click on it and drag it so you release some or none of the signal over to the bus. You'll also see that the output of bus 4 is now connected to input bus 4. So that was all set up for you. That wasn't something you had to do. You didn't have to do any of that yourself. And that's, again, one of the benefits of Logic is that a lot of the manual things that Pro Tools made you do, you don't have to do. All you have to do is just know I need a bus. So once I created that bus on my Vox track, an auxiliary track was created for me, and the route for that auxiliary track was created as well. So I don't have to change the input to bus 4 to connect it. It does it for me. All right, that is one of the benefits of Logic. They're pretty intuitive on how they work their magic. So now I can start adding my time-based plugins. Again, time-based plugins include things like reverb and delay and other things that change time and space. So let's go in and start by adding our our Space Designer. We'll start with Space Designer. So I'm going to head and go into my audio effects, or my inserts as we call them. I'm going to go ahead and drop down to reverb, which is down here. And there's a couple of different reverbs. We can take a look at them if you'd like. Verb is a very old school but updated version of the reverb that Logic originally came with. Similar things that we talked about again in Pro Tools when we're talking about reverb. We have space, we have size, we have spread, we have density, we have all the details that tell you about the sound and how it's reacting to the space it's going into. And it also comes with, again, a bunch of different presets. In this case, some of these are late reflections, which means a long time, response at 120 BPM, so a reverb that reacts to a 120 BPM. There's some reversing, rolling up, fast reverse, aggressive tail. So you can see there's some cool stuff to mess around with once you get in there. And the presets are usually pretty good, being descriptive of what it actually is. Platinum Verb, which is also a triple OG version of reverb. And you could tell just by looking at it how old school it is. This is the old Logic 7 layout, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 7 or 8 that they gave you this look, this old school, kind of Pro Tools-y look, to be honest with you. Not a fan of it. Not a fan of Platinum Verb because they never really updated it. Silver Verb, again, very descriptive, but again, it's not used as much as I would like to probably use it. I usually use Space Designer. And what's great about this one is it is updated. As you can see, the controls and the way it's laid out is just more modern. It does have, again, all the same things that reverb plugs should have. Pre-delay, reflectivity, the size of the space, the density, high and low cut, so you can reverb only certain frequencies if you like. The difference for Silver Verb is it does have a modulation section, so you can actually send things off phase and have them interact with each other. So that's another way of kind of messing around with the signal, not only bounce it off a surface and send it back at a different time, but that signal coming back, is it going to be in phase, out of phase? Is it going to cycle? Is it going to modulate? Is it going to oscillate? There's different ways of kind of messing around with that. The one we are going to use today is going to be Space Designer, one of my favorites. And when it comes up, it does still have sort of the old feel, but be aware that they have done great things to Space Designer. Let's take a look at the layout and I'll show you. All right, so Space Designer's idea was to take a sample, not of what you recorded, but just any sample. Maybe it's a sine wave, right? And that you could see there in the background. It's kind of like shadowed in the background there. And then it allows you to visually see how reverb is going to work on any one sample and apply that over to your track. Let's take a look at the layout and we'll go through that in a moment. All right, first things first, this little dial right here. All right, now the dial represents two different ways that we can attack timed reverb plugins. The first one is the one that we will mostly use, and that is Synthesized Ir. IR stands for impulse responses. That means signals sent out into a room, bouncing around the room, and received back. Now, had we been in class, last year I purchased a device that allowed me to send a signal out, bounce it in our classroom, receive it back with a specialized mic, and create our own impulse response of our classroom. Those types of processes are IR samples, samples that can be taken of a space. All right, so let's give you a quick scenario. You record in your bathroom all the time. Why? Because it's very reflective, it's echoey, you like the early reflections along with the main mix of your direct microphone. Everything sounds great in the bathroom. That's why people do like singing in the shower, because it's very reflective and it sounds awesome to you. And you might want to capture that idea, that environment, and put it into your computer. And you can do that. That's what impulse response samples allow you to do. Now, a lot of times you're going to need more specialized equipment to capture that impulse response sample. So that's where kind of the drop-off is for regular people trying to get that idea, or people that know how to do it, have the equipment, have everything necessary. And of course, why would I even want to get the reverb environment of my bathroom? Well, you can record in your bathroom, right? You can go into your bathroom, you can set up a mic, you stand in the tub, you put your reflection filter on and you sing and it sounds unbelievably awesome. All right. But someone, especially in times like these, can't come over to your bathroom and sing. You still want to get that sound though. You still want to feel like Tony all the way out in California is singing in my bathroom. So here's how you do it. You have Tony record clean, dry vocals. And then you get an impulse response sample of your bathroom using the specialized hardware and software. And it's not super expensive. And in fact, there is an impulse response utility that Logic does have that can actually help you with this a little bit. It's not quite as good without the equipment, but it works. And you can apply your bathroom reverb to Tony, who did not come over your house, did not record in your bathroom, and you can make it sound like he was. And so that's where it comes in. Now, your bathroom isn't that special, let's be honest. So the real reason for this existing is there are places in this world that have amazing acoustics. And in order for us to take advantage of those spaces without actually having to be at those spaces, IR samples are available to you. Next thing I want to tell you is that there are IR samples available to you online. If you go online and you Google search IR sample, you might find people that already created an IR sample of different environments. And now you can take that IR sample, load it into Space Designer, and utilize their environment for your vocal track, for your guitar track, for your whatever it is you want to send through it. So that's why IR samples exist. But typically speaking, most of us are going to use some sort of synthesized IR. Now, the synthesized IR basically are these samples that are based upon, let's say, algorithms and mathematical equations for how long it takes for a sound to go into an environment, bounce off, and come back. All right, so it has to do with time, attack, decay, how much of that was done, what the density of it is coming back. So many parameters that go into determining that. And Logic comes with a whole bunch of different synthesized IRs already packaged when you download it. So if I go into my presets here of Logic, you'll see that there's a bunch of different spaces. There's some that are larger, some that are smaller, some that have even more effects on top of just reverb, things like warping and surrounding. So if we look at spaces like large spaces, then they break it down and categorize them even further. So they have these rooms, halls, plates, spring, indoor, outdoor, warped. So if I go into a large room, here's how they categorize it even further. So they're saying you should categorize your room by time and then by what other effects are going to change the signal. So I have anywhere between a 1.4 second, that's a really long reverb, to a 5.7, which is a ridiculously long reverb signal. That means it's going to take a very long time before it stops making sound. It's constantly bouncing around. Highly reflective with very little diffusion, very little absorption. That sound is just wild, flying through that space. All right. And then it kind of changes up to halls where you can see it actually gets a little bigger. There's actually a 14.8 second stairs mid-level reverb. Wow, that's ridiculous. And again, all of these have been based upon mathematical equations, or they were IR samples that they converted into just math. Plate reverbs, they tend to be between 2 and 5 seconds. Springs, anywhere between 3 and 4 or 5. Indoor space is a little tighter, 1.9 plane hanger. That doesn't seem all that, long for a plane hanger, but I guess if we used it, it does go into a 14-second dome, super dome. Remember, we are talking about large spaces. So the signals do get smaller. If I go into small spaces and I go into rooms, we go from a 0.2 second room up to a 1.2 or 1.6. If we go into a hall, we're only talking about a 0.6 to a 1.6. And even our indoor spaces are really tiny. A 0.1 second illusion room. 0.1 seconds is really not even enough for your brain to decipher between direct and indirect sound or direct and reverb sound. but it does change the signal just enough where that when it's in a mix, and if you send enough of that signal, you will start hearing an effect. Now, check this out. There's also a 0.06 inside the car reverb. Now, you know, in your room right now, walking around outside, what the reverb is. You're not thinking about it in terms of normal life, walking around and going, oh, what's the reverb of this? But you know that there's a difference from when you're outside the car to when you're inside the car. And so that difference of sound from out to in has to be made sometimes. And it has to be made artificially. So a lot of times you can use reverb to help do that. There's also a 0.08, and I believe there's another 0.0 somewhere in here as well. But these are the small spaces. There are warped ones. Again, they don't have a time element in them because a lot of times the time is overshadowed by the amount of effect. Like ringing dissonance, which is right over here, really, as much as it may have a time element to it, you're really selecting this because you want this ringing, this high frequency bouncing only. So it's not only going to give you the echo, but it's also going to shrink down the frequencies that are going to be echoed. As we talked way back in acoustics, and the reason why we did the acoustics lesson is that we know that there are some spaces whose materials in that space absorb and reflect frequencies differently. So why wouldn't a reverb actually show that kind of change in environment and material and size and space? It has to. It's the only way that makes sense. So that's kind of what IR samples and synthesized samples are, and they really can be explored more through the presets. Now let's take a look at this little visualization window here. This is an important one. It's showing you a bunch of stuff. Let's start with the top here. So there's a full reset on all the settings, or you can see all the settings in one. I'm sorry, if I reset them all, and I'm going to go back to it right here. And I can reset the volume envelope. I can reset the filter. I can reset the density. So each one of these things, the volume, which has to do with from first attack to last decay, and the slope at which that volume and volume of the reverb reacts and sounds like. Filter, it has to do with your filtering envelope, which is down here. So the settings you put here have to do with how the shape of this is. You could see that as I change this, that there are certain things that will change throughout, especially in the waveform. You can see it back there changing tremendously. So that's changing and shaping things like attack time, initial time, decay time, and levels. We have our density envelope, which has a lot to do with the thickness or feel of the reflection. There is an EQ in here, so you can do some EQing of the reverb itself. I don't recommend that. I think most of the EQ that you did back on the original track should mostly represent what you want that final signal to sound like. So don't go too crazy EQing using Space Designer. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, you can do it. I just don't recommend it because you might get too You don't want to double and triple up your EQs, and then you can't back out of it, or you lose a sense of what the original sound was supposed to be like. And you're going to have a hard time backtracking through all the settings you messed with. Check this out. You also have a reverse reverb, which is very, very cool. I like using this sometimes. Now, this doesn't reverse the audio signal. That's a whole different thing we'll talk about later. But this is a reverse of the reverb signal. So instead of being heavy reflections up front and then it tailing off, this starts really slow and builds up. So it gets either louder or more filtered or more dense as time goes on. We can look back at this. When I start doing reverb on my actual track, I will let you hear what reverse sounds like. It's a cool, cool concept. All right, what else we got? Like any other reverb, we have a dry and a wet signal. In this case, they're calling it dry and reverb. Now, because of the way we organized our signal, this track should be representing reverb. So in that case, I'm going to jack this up to 100%. All right, if there's any changes that need to be made in regards to volume being fed in or amount of reverb, that change needs to be made back here on the bus with this faucet that we turn on and off. So we're not going to be changing anything over here we're going to crank up the reverb so it's 100%, but we're going to let this track be our dry signal, all right? And we're going to use this to control how much wet goes into it. We're not going to use this to control it. So we'll just leave that at 100%. If you put it at 0%, you hear nothing. So you have to put it at 100. It's either 0 or 100. All right, let's take a look down here in the filter bank. So we have some resolution settings that we can set. Right now it is on. It is doing some sort of high pass, low pass filtering here based upon my factory default settings. I can turn it off. So as you can see, that gets rid of that filter envelope that was there. All right, that's gone. So that's what that filter setting is. As I mentioned before, we have volume. Then we have filtering, which is this guy over here. And then we have the density, which now has settings down here. And that's what this little window is here. It actually changes as you make changes up here. So I can make the changes down here in the window. They'll reflect up here in the visualization. Or if I make changes in the visualization, they'll reflect down here in the window. Finally, on the right-hand side, there are some basic reverb settings that we know about. We know about pre-delay. We use pre-delay back in Pro Tools when we had their reverb. Basically, it's how much sound is going to build up and delays before it lets it go. So you don't have to have a tremendous amount of pre-delay on there. You can actually turn that up or turn that down. Spread has to do with panning left and right, how much is coming. So this looks like it's going to be spread a little further over. Well, I have it disabled, but it's going to be spread a little over. Well, it's pretty centered, nothing crazy. Impulse response utility start. Well, that has to do with when I get an IR sample running. And then the crossover, obviously, we know that when signals go over or under a certain frequency, things can change. So you can set that boundary mark here at the crossover. But basic settings that you should start with are going to come through this reverb preset. So let's go into just medium spaces. Let's just pick a room. Let's throw on, yeah, wine cellar. Why not? Oh, wait, Michaelis Abbey. Well, I'm a Michael, so we'll do Michaelis Abbey. Wow, things have really changed here. I want to show you something. This particular sample is an actual sample. It was a sample that was recorded at Michaelis Abbey. An actual sample recorded at an abbey. I don't know what the actual space was. I guess if we wanted to look it up, we could. Michaelis Abbey. Let's see if it's actually a thing. Oh, it is. Look at that. Let's see if there's any images really fast. See if we can see. Well, there's a bunch of girls named Abby. Well, that's not helpful. But anyway, there was, I would assume it's an abbey, which if no one knows, it's kind of like a monastery or a rectory for monks. So the abbey actually probably had this really nice open space that had a 2.175 second reverb. So here's what I did. I used Michaelis Abbey, 2.2 second. I cranked up the reverb to 100% because that's what happens when we put it on this track. And now I'm going to slowly play back in a loop, and I'm going to crank up the bus until I feel like enough of the original signal is feeding the reverb, and I get this effect that I'm looking for. So I'll push play. I'll move the mic so you guys can hear it if you're not hearing computer audio, and then you guys can take a listen. So here we go.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
Okay, so what I was just doing there, let me explain my movements, my tracking really quick. Basically, the first thing I did was obviously put the reverb plugin on and leave the settings accordingly to what the preset said. Then I came over and I activated the bus by dragging and letting go of some of the original dry signal over to the bus. When I did that, I found that there was a lot of signal reverb-wise in my mix. So I got it to about where I wanted it in regards to releasing signal to it. And then I came over to my bus and I said, all right, at 0, which is this fader right here, it's a lot. man, it is just a lot of signal. So I slowly pulled it down until till I got what I was looking for, which was just a little bit of that background signal of reverb. Here it is again.
Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in.
So it kind of gives, like, some space and size to my vocal track. It's not just this flat mono down the middle of your eyes kind of signal. It kind of spreads out a little bit. It opens it up, and that's what I was looking for. You'll also notice that I did solo the track. I start with soloing the track to isolate, to make sure I'm getting what I get. Now that I'm done with that, I'm going to release it back into the mix and see how it plays out.
Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in.
And it does. Because it's a 2.2 second delay, it's pretty big and long. It actually kind of adds a lot of elements into the background of the mix now. Let's change my Abbey signal. Let's go back into something smaller. We'll go into a small hall, and let's just say a dynamic hall. It's a 1 second delay as opposed to a 2.2. All right, same thing. I'm going to go in. I'm going to mute it. I'm going to solo it. I'm going to reset this signal, by the way, to 0. And I'm going to slowly reset everything back the way I had it. I'm going to slowly release some of the signal into the Space Designer, and then I'm going to use the Space Designer's fader to kind of do that final mixing. So I'll let you listen as I go through my process.
Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in.
All right, so I like where I ended up there. You can see I released less of the signal into the Space Designer, and I actually reduced the fader of the auxiliary track even less than I did last time. Now I'm going to release it back into the mix, and let's see how it sounds.
Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in.
Okay, so now I think I like that better than my last one. And yeah, it took me a minute to kind of realize that because, we have to kind of figure out what we're looking for. Do I want long? Do I want short? Do I want less? Do I want more? I can put a really long reverb in this, but only let it squeeze out just a little bit of juice into the mix. That's possible. And that may or may not produce a very similar signal. But we know definingly that there are some things that work and that there are some things that not. Like when you hear something that's way too long and way too powerful, you're like, ugh, I don't want that. But you should know how to kind of manipulate and change settings to kind of get closer to what you're looking for. Let's try one more. This time we will go large. We'll go plate, and we'll go 5 seconds. And now this says shimmering plate, which to me means there's going to be some high frequencies involved. Let's reset our settings over here. So I'll drop this back to 0. I'll push this back up to 0. I'll make sure we're at 100% reverb. All right, and now let's take a listen. This will start off dry, and I'll slowly add in my mixed wet signal.
Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in. Punch-in, and this is a test only on the punch-in.
Now, I don't know if you guys can hear all those echoes, but because this is a 5 second delay and the clip that I'm using is only like 4 seconds, the delay or the reverb, sorry, not the delay, the reverb will continue well after this clip has stopped speaking. And because we keep looping it and cycling it, I'm actually getting overlapped versions of what I said over and over and over again. So I don't always want to use a long reverb, or I don't always want to use cycling when I'm using a long reverb, because sometimes it'll cut it off and it'll give you a incorrect version of what you're looking for. So sometimes with longer reverbs, you'll just have to maybe drag out that loop a little further so you can get a good idea of exactly how that reverb is acting. So that's what I'll do. I'll drag out that reverb for at least, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, just to be sure that this is exactly what I want. Here's what it sounds like.
Punch-in and this is a test only on the punch-in.
You could hear there's some echoes there afterwards. So that is a reason why you would probably extend that cycle loop just to be sure that you're getting all of the leftover reverb in the space that the designer did for you. Again, I don't really like that one, so I'll jump back to my small, and what I picked before. I picked, yes, dynamic hall, and I'll make sure, again, my settings are correct, and I'll play it back just to be sure.
Punch-in and this is a test only on the punch-in.
And that's pretty good. And then again, I'll release it back into the mix and see what happens.
Punch-in and this is a test only on the punch-in.
Perfect. And here's what I'm also looking to do, all right? And I want you to see this really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide these 4 tracks. These are my auxiliary tracks, correct? I'm going to hide those. How do we hide a track? Well, you push H and you hide the tracks you don't want. And you tend to push H again, which, hold on, let me go over here and just be sure I can hide these. Well, they're only hidden here. Oh, I know how I can do it. Forget it. That's all in the mixer here, in the editor. In the mixer, all I have to do is hit aux, and they're gone. Bye-bye. So I'm going to hide those for a minute, just so I don't look at them. And what I do when I'm mixing is I will first mix based upon what I see of dry tracks versus wet tracks. Let me explain. Not that I'm going to deactivate my buses, but I'm going to concentrate very hard on making sure that the Sunset kit, piano, violins, the effect of drums, the piano again, and my vocal track all play together nicely, even in a dry sense. Then when I'm ready, I'm going to unleash or revisit the auxiliary tracks to then balance them out. So what I'm saying is I do 2 different kinds of mixing here. I'm mixing dry tracks to start, just making sure that they all play together. Then once their buses are released, I'm going back and mixing the reverb to play with each other nicely. And then I'm looking at the entire project as a whole to make sure now everything's playing nice together. All the dries are playing nice with the dries, all the wets are playing nice with the wets, and then all the dries and the wets are playing nice as well. That is the step-by-step, very strategic way of mixing that I've learned over the years, not by any one person or any one YouTube channel or any one thing, but influences from things I've read and seen, and also hours and hours of time spent in this program. And not just this program. We're talking about Pro Tools. We're talking about Logic. This is a general mixing concept. How do I get my mix to sound good? These are the basic elements of getting into that. You know, everyone wants the instant gratification answer of how do I go from point A to point B with no work? You can't. You can't. The only way you're going to get there is hard work. And the only way you're going to get there is because you enjoy that hard work. And I do. I really do enjoy the exploratory moments where I'm trying to figure out why that works and why that doesn't. And how I even know how to do that is because I had to put in time and education and information and research and figure it out. Most engineers will probably tell you the same. No one person sat down, told them X, Y, and Z, and they became a magical engineer. Didn't happen overnight. Nope. A lot of them got tips and tricks and communicated and networked, but then had to spend a lot of time on their own figuring some of these stuffs out. I'm giving it to you. Yes, I'm one of those guys that I am giving you information. I'm doing some of the hard things for you. The problem is, eventually, you're going to have to do it for yourself to fully understand it. And I don't mean understand what I'm doing physically in the software. I mean understand how when I sit down with this artist and when I sit down with this orchestra and when I sit down with this guitarist, I know how to properly do the technical pieces first. After that, I can't teach you how to be creative. I can't. That's in you. You got to know what you want. You got to be able to get what you want. What I can get you is from point A to point B technically, but not creatively. So I want you to really take a look at, how we're laying things out. Very, very specific on how I do these things. Let's do something else. Let's take a look at Delay Designer now. So to do that, we're going to need another bus. We can't use the same bus. We can't throw delay on a reverb track. Then we're only delaying the reverb. I don't want to delay the reverb. I want to delay the original dry audio. So let's go back to our original track. Here it is. We're going to add another bus. Again, another unused bus. You can see as we use them, they change. Bus 5. This one I'm going to type in Vox Delay or Vox Del. Vox Rev and Vox Del. I'm going to add my delay designer. So let's go down to delay. There it is. So there's a couple of these as well. I'll run through them really fast. Basically, tape delay. And let me just pop. This has been an updated version of a delay. Of course, you know delay has to do with time. There's also modulation and LFOs and flutters. So this one's kind of cool. It kind of mimics what tape delays used to be, you know, when physical tape was around. Stereo delay has to do with delaying your left and a right independently. So you can see there's a left delay and a right delay independent. What else is in here? Sample delay. Okay, this is kind of cool, actually. So these are based on samples or milliseconds. So you can actually delay it by a very specific sample. And by sample, I don't mean, you know, I'm cutting a track up from somebody, I'm going to use a sample. No, we're talking about the very basic building blocks of sound, right? Ones and zeros, a sample. So that's what these are. 44,100 samples per second. All right, that's what we're trying to offset. And you can go up to 10,000. Or in time, you can go up to 250 milliseconds. All right, there are presets in here, by the way. You can use these. So that's a sample all the way down to a very specific unit of measurement delay. Echo. Echo, you know this. Come on, it's echo. But this is also based upon time of the project and quantization, which is really cool. So you could see here note values of all the way from 1/2 to a whole to a quarter, eighth, 16th, 32nd, and I don't think there's a 64th here now. But it goes pretty low in regards to samples. So it will basically give you a sample every eighth note, or by the way, a delay every eighth note. You can add a little color, which has to do with some density, a little bit of feedback, which means it's bouncing back and getting to you. So things are changing here in the Echo. I recommend playing with them before I go into them. But my one that I'm really concerned about you understanding is Delay Designer. Now, Delay Designer also has, click on it there, a very similar look that Reverb Designer did, or Space Designer. And it is based upon the old version. And as much as I don't like that, Delay Designer is very, very specific, meaning I can do things that I can't do in any other of these plugins. So again, I always start with a preset because it's just easy when you're starting out to figure out what things are doing and how things are changing by messing around with the presets. So I'm going to go ahead and go into a simple pan. All right. So the visualizer comes up here. The settings down here are going to reflect what's here. Let's take a look at the left-hand side. Of course, we can sync it to a 1/4-inch grid, which means a quarter note. And if I'm quarter noting things, that means I'm quantizing. That means there's very specific moments. So that means it's it's happening on every beat for every bar. I can swing it a little bit. So right now it's a little before, a little after. You can actually tap in your own delay time. So if I wanted to tap fast, I could have actually a really fast delay time. Or if I wanted to tap really slow, I could do that as well. Let's take a look at the visualizer window here. So we have cutoffs. Cutoff means at what frequency, what frequency that this ends up going at. So for instance, if you look at these particular bars and I change them, you see down here at the bottom left, this is showing you it's between 20 hertz and 22 kilohertz. So again, we can change the frequency at which the delay is happening. So if we're only delaying, 10K to 20K, I can do that. And I can do that for each one of the 4 beats that are within the delay. Resolution, or for this case, it's the ability to kind of change time and swing time a little bit. I don't recommend this unless you know what you're doing, or if you use a preset that is using it. You can see that there is a couple little small blips of this on here, about 5 to 6%, but not something that you kind of want to mess around with. Otherwise, you're going to get this really crazy signal in the back end. Transposition means changing the pitch. And so when I transpose a note or when I transpose a signal, I'm going to get a different result. If I want to bend it up and make it seem, maybe a higher pitch, I can do that. Or I can bend it down as well. So we can have it go up and down. This means each of the delays that happen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, each one is going to have a different pitch. This one's going to be pitched up. The next delay is going to be pitched down. This one's going to be pitched up. The next one's going to be pitched down. So you can create your own patterns. Right now, my pan is disabled based upon my simple pan, and that's why it's disabled, because it already panned it out for you. But if I had a different one, which I could pick something more complex, I don't know why this one doesn't have it. We can go into it. I got to poke around to find out which one doesn't have it or does have it. But basically, you can left and right each delay. One delay can come off on the left, one delay can come off on the right, which is pretty cool. And finally, there is a volume level. So each of these individual delays can be equally as loud, which means you just go straight across the board, or as the delays go on, they get softer and softer and softer, and eventually they will fade out. So again, very, very detailed organization of how delays are going to happen. Again, I can't stress this enough. Do yourself a favor and start with a preset, because then you could see how, for instance, a quarter note alternating pan would look. Your cutoff doesn't really cut off. Your reso doesn't do much. Your transpose isn't much going on. The pan's already set, and the level is set to a slope off. Now, let's go into our program, and then let's increase a little bit of the bus here so we can release a little bit of this signal. Let's take a look at it in solo mode.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So there's my signal with both dry and reverb wet. Now I'm going to start releasing in a little bit of the delay, and let's take a listen to how I can mess around with that.
Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in. Punch in, and this is a test only on the punch in.
So as you can see, my process there is starting with soloing the track. All right. I left the bus for the reverb in for a little bit. I then released some of the dry signal over to the delay designer. I then muted, or basically deactivated, the reverb bus for a minute, because I wanted to hear how the delay was just by itself, both dry signal and wet signal. And then I put the reverb back in. And then, of course, I then added the entire mix back in. And so I'm looking at it as like super zoomed in, hyper focused on just signals. And then I pull all the way back out and see how everything plays out in the mix. All right. These are very easy ways to mess around with, signaling and get that final result you're looking for. Again, the technical elements here are creating buses that go over to auxiliary tracks. On those auxiliary tracks, we're creating time effects, space designer, delay designer, Logic's great, very detailed, customized ways of creating these. And then being able to use your buttons here in the mixer to isolate and then start pulling back out of the mix until you get to the whole mix to make sure what you just did is exactly what you want. I don't want to go much further. That was a lot of information. That is actually 2 days of information in one day. It only took about 45 minutes to get through. And if you have questions, I'll give you about 30 seconds to raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask your question. Otherwise, again, if you guys wanted to go back through that and watch it while you're doing other things, or by the way, if you have Logic, obviously, watch the video while you're using Logic to follow my steps to see what you can do. But also watch the videos after we're done, just to kind of And you can skip ahead, right? You could kind of on demand it, but you can go back and just kind of clear up any of the misconceptions or um, ideas that we did not connect, that you did not connect, rather, together to old lessons, things that you just need help with, or just in general, just to stay on top of things. Definitely go back and watch the lessons each day. It's really important. Unlike class, I really don't stop and ask every 10 minutes, what do you think? What are we doing? How are we doing this? I just plow through it. But when I can plow through it, man, I can go on for hours. I can keep going. I'm just not going to today. So tomorrow, what we'll end up doing is talking a little bit more about the mixing elements of all of the things that we built. And as I mentioned to you, we did some automation with effects. So I want to show you some of that. And then maybe we'll wrap up next week also with a couple little elements outside of EQ, compression, and timed effects. We'll do something else too. Maybe I'll throw a guitar in there and I'll show you pedal board, which I have my guitar right here in my studio. Been messing around with it for days. In fact, I will say this, another musician, artist, and myself are collaborating in this time, and we're going to be releasing a cover song of a relatively brand new song that is out by he and I's one of our favorite artists in the industry, and they came out with a really cool song, and we decided we're going to cover it. So we'll be releasing that, and when I do have it, maybe I'll put it into the project and we'll mess around with it. All right, nothing else? Listen, guys, the morning, not so nice, but the afternoon is beautiful. Get out there. So for the next hour or so before lunch and a little after lunch before it gets nice later today, do yourself a favor, catch up on some work, get some things done. Don't let the day go past without doing anything. The more and more you do that, the more and more it's going to be a much more stressful May or June, regardless of being home or not. My hope is that we're back soon, and I hope as I see all your beautiful faces in the next few weeks. I will talk to you soon. Please check the Google Classroom. Please make sure you watch YouTube videos. Please make sure you complete all the projects. O'Toole out.